Hi, in this video we're looking at the evaluation question for the GCSE English Language. For the EDUQAS exam board this will be the last question, and for the AQA this will be question 4. So the question is, in the final part of this passage the writer encouraged us to dislike Bruce. To what extent do you agree with this view? And then there's a few bullet points that we're going to look at in a second. So like I said, for EDUQAS people, this question will be question 5 in the exam, i.e. the last one. And your question will either be something like, how far do you agree, which is the one we just saw, or it might say evaluate, but just be aware that it was basically the same question. And straight away, the question is about whether you agree or not. So tip straight away is always try to agree with the comment. You can disagree, but I would just say it's easier to make an argument if you agree with whatever it is in the question. I would say you got about 15 minutes for this question. And the most important thing you need to do with this question is give yourself time to do it. This means managing your time carefully on the rest of the exam. Don't go over 15 minutes for every 10-mark question. So what I mean is, if this is the last question exam, you've got to make sure you give yourself 15 minutes to do it. So how many quotes do you need to use? Well, it's a 10-mark question, so I would say you should be looking to use 7 to 10 quotes. Remember, the exam board love tracking through the text. That means using as many quotes as possible, going down the text top to bottom. So you need to use a range of quotes like I just said, but just make sure it's from the beginning, middle, or the end of the extract. So we just don't want your quotes taking place from the start. We want it to be throughout, so all the way through, consistently through the extract. So what's the good news about this question? Well, the beauty of this question is that you can write about anything, even if you've already said it for other questions, so that's good news. You must make sure it's relevant. So if you've answered, say if you've in question 2, if you've mentioned something, if it fits with this question, you can use it for this question too. So here's the way the exam question looks. So there's 5 questions. However, if we look at question 2, question 3 and question 4, it says use relevant subject terminology, which is this stuff in the top right hand corner. However, for question 5, it doesn't say we need to do this. So although we are going to refer to the text to support our answer, we don't need to use the relevant subject terminology. We don't need to say adverbs, hyperbole, onomatopoeia, or whatever. So that's good news. So we don't have to use that. In this question, you don't need to talk about the techniques, so like I've just said. So what is evaluation? Well, evaluation is a judgment of something or someone. You're being asked to engage with a text and think carefully about what is happening and how that might make you feel. So you will get a quote, so you'll get a random quote, so they might say this is from a student. So for example, the student said, in the final part of this passage, the writer encourages us to dislike Bruce. Okay, so you've got to say whether you agree or not with that. I would say you should be agreeing with it. So let's look at the question again. So it says, to what extent do you agree with this view that you don't like him? So to what extent basically means how much do you agree that you dislike Bruce? Remember the line to the question, okay, 68 to 81. However, it says you should read 68 to 81 and write your answer on that. However, it also does say a passage as a whole as well. So it says your thoughts and feelings about Bruce as he is presented here in 68 to 81, but also as a passage as a whole. So I would start at the beginning of the text and work methodically, picking out and giving your view of the main points that say something about the character, or in this place, why we don't like Bruce. You should be commenting on every through line to the text. Make sure you get to the very end of the text. So again, that's that thing of tracking, doing as many quotes as we can. So we look at the question again. So this question wants you to explore how the writer has made you feel a personal response, e.g. we dislike Bruce. Okay, how was the whole point of this question is, how has the writer made you feel that you dislike Bruce? So I would say a really good tip that I can give you is rephrase the question. So for example, this question is, how does the writer encourage us to dislike Bruce? I would rephrase the question, do I dislike Bruce? So, and then in the question, look, what words and phrases make you dislike him? So if I'm talking about you, think to yourself, why do I dislike Bruce? What words or phrases make me dislike him? Okay, another exam question, it says here, feel sympathy for Megan. How far do you agree with this? So again, rephrase it. Do I feel sorry for Megan? What words or phrases make you feel that? Another exam question, Jackson is nothing but a violent thug himself. So again, rephrase the question. Do I think he's a violent thug? If so, what words and phrases make me feel that he's a violent thug? Okay, so let's have a read through the extract. Perhaps she was worth a little attention. He was, after all, between girlfriends now that Laura had gone to London. They had agreed he would go to London every month, but it hadn't worked out. He had been unable to find the time, and she had been most unreasonable about it, he thought. If you cared anything about me, you would have made the effort, she had said. But you don't, and you didn't. He had been appalled by the unfairness of this attack. There had been very good reasons why he could not go to London, apart from the expense, of course. There was a rugby international that weekend, and if she thought he was going to miss it just to go to London for a weekend, then she was going to have to think again, which she did. Bruce turned, and as he did so, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror and smiled. "Terrific," he said, unbuttoning his rugby shirt. "That looks just terrific." It was a favourite mirror of his, full length, which made it possible for him to inspect the benefits of his regular sessions at the gym. Very satisfactory, he thought. Okay, so again, let's rephrase the question. Why do you dislike Bruce? Do I dislike Bruce? What words or phrases make you dislike him? So if you want to, pause the video and just have a look at a few words or phrases. Try to pick out 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 words or phrases that will make you dislike this guy, that make you dislike Bruce. So I guess a really easy example would be the fact that he has got in his favourite mirror, he looks at himself and says terrific. So again, we might be thinking there that he's vain. So let's look through it. So remember the question is, in final part of the passage, the writer encourages us to dislike Bruce. Okay, or why do I dislike him? So what thoughts or feelings do you have about Bruce? So let's look at it. So if we look from the top, he was after all between girlfriends. So straight away, I would say he seems a bit unappealing because we get the impression that maybe he's a serial dater or a player. They had agreed to go to London every month, but it had not worked out. So I would say that even though we're encouraged to dislike him, we can look at other sides of the argument too. I would say that seems fairly reasonable at this stage. It's just not worked out. So at this stage of the extract, we're not really disliking him. Relationships don't work out, so that's a human thing. However, we start to dislike him when he said he hadn't been able to find the time. She had been most unreasonable about it, he thought. So straight away, we're beginning to sense that he's the reason things to blame. But the way he says it, she had been most unreasonable, putting all the blame on his ex-girlfriend, makes him seem petty and a bit small. Then it says, if you cared anything about me, you would have made the effort, but you didn't. Again, so we're getting that impression that he might have been lazy in the relationship. And then he says he had been appalled by the unfairness of attack. So all those words, appalled, attack, unfairness, they're very over the top, very melodramatic. So again, we're not really liking the fact that he seems a bit of a drama queen. So he doesn't just say that he was annoyed, he said he was appalled. It makes it sound really bad. He doesn't just say he was appalled by what the girl had said, what Laura had said. He said it was an attack, making it sound like he's been physically and mentally hurt from it. Then he says one of the reasons he didn't go to London was for the expense. So again, not particularly nice image of him. We're not really particularly liking him because we're thinking he's a bit cheap. And then again, the fact that he only wanted to go rugby international makes himself a bit selfish. And then when it says she was going to have to think again, that almost sounds a little bit old-fashioned, doesn't it? A male chauvinist a little bit, where almost like the old-fashioned woman would have to do what the man says. Then the blue, I've put which she did. So again, we're maybe seeing a bit of a different side to him, that maybe not a totally dislikable, where we're getting the sense, well, even though he's making out like he's the big man, it seems that Laura, the female in the relationship, was the one that ended the relationship. So maybe all this bluster and all this bragging, what he's doing, maybe he's just a bit insecure, and all this confidence is a bit of a sham. Then it says Bruce turned and he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror and smiled. So straight away we're thinking he's a bit egotistical, a bit vain. And then he says terrific. So even though he's on his own in the flat, he says terrific. That looks terrific. So again, getting the sense that he's a bit of a prat, a bit arrogant. Okay, even the fact that he's got a favourite mirror which is full length so he can see his own body, again we're thinking that he's very arrogant, very vain. And then at the end he says blah blah blah, regular, then he says very satisfactory at the end. So again we're getting that vain, but again maybe we're seeing a bit of an unfair side that the writer is given, where regular sessions at the gym. So although he's been painted as a bit of a figure of fun towards the end, looking in the mirror and saying terrific, he goes to the gym regularly. It's a fairly natural thing that people look at themselves in the mirror. However, the writer has portrayed him in a way where it seems that he's a bit of a figure of fun. However, I would say 90% of the extract, we are definitely encouraged to dislike Bruce, but there are a couple of things in there that we think, well, maybe he's not such a bad guy. So how are we going to structure our answer to this question? So this is the question again, remember. Why do we dislike him? Your thoughts and feelings about him. Okay, so again, remember the tips. Always agree it's easier to present an argument. Try to use one word or two word quotations where possible. This makes my inference on what I'm saying really clear and specific to the question. Okay, another teacher tip, try to start sentences with phrases such as I think, I feel. It might be a bit robotic, but it keeps us really focused on the question. Okay, so I would say start with a sentence saying how much you agree. So for example, I completely agree that the writer encourages the reader to dislike Bruce in this extract. Remember, the question is to what extent. So it'd be good to use a word like completely or utterly or something like that. Number 2, track through the text. So what I mean by this is go all through the text using quotes, 9 or 10 quotes from the top all the way through to the bottom of the extract. Then every sentence make a clear point, back up with evidence which answers the question. So for example, I think he is vain when he looks at himself in the mirror and he says he looks terrific. So I've said why I've disliked him, and I've said the quote that's told me that, terrific. And number 4, at the end of all the quotes, after your 10 quotes, try to finish with an overall sentence summing up your main points. So, by the end of the whole extract, Bruce is a very different person in my eyes. He evolves from pleasant and charming to arrogant, selfish and totally likeable. So we're going to talk about why he's pleasant and charming in a minute, but in our extract, he's arrogant, selfish and totally likeable. So if you comment on change, the examiner's really going to like that. Okay, so if we look at that on like a word page, so this is our answer. The black part is starting with a sentence saying how much you agree. Then I've tracked through the points, tracked through the text and made clear points and back it up with quotes. And in my red at the bottom, I just finished with my overall sentence that I've just gone on. So you've really got to make sure that you pick out a quote and say why that makes you dislike Bruce. So, from the beginning, I think Bruce comes across as disrespectful towards women, as we're told he's between girlfriends. I feel this makes him an unappealing serial dater who is looking for his conquest. So, I put what I think about him, that he is a bit of a player. I've put the quote, he's between girlfriends, and I've told why I don't like him. Well, it makes him seem like a bit of a player, a bit of someone who you wouldn't want to be around. Next one. At first, his excuses for his relationship ending seem valid, unable to find the time, but he quickly blames it on his ex. She had been most reasonable. I think this makes him seem petty and small. So by the way, my quotes were in red and my yellow is saying why I don't like him. So the fact that he's blaming the ex-girlfriend in my head makes him seem petty and small, that he's not mature enough to take a fair share of the blame in the relationship. So I feel the hyperbolic, so remember exaggerating. So remember, I don't need to use this kind of language, but in this case, I'm saying why I dislike him. So I feel the hyperbolic language used by the writer, appalled, unfairness and attack, portray him as a melodramatic and makes me think his ex is better off without him. So yeah, so those words make him seem dislikable and that he's a bit of a drama queen. I think the expense being on one of the reasons he didn't go to London makes him seem cheap and ungenerous, while not missing the rugby international makes me think he is selfish. So again, my red is my quote, my yellow is why I don't like him. So the fact that he's not going to London, he's not spending about £20 or £30 on a ticket, shows that he's not really bothered the relationship and he seems a bit cheap and not particularly generous. The veiled threat of she was going to have to think again makes me think he is old-fashioned. So the whole thing is that he almost thinks that the woman in the relationship should do what the man says. So this makes me feel he's old-fashioned and chauvinistic. And however, we're going to look at maybe a different side of it. By however, which she did, as in she left him, it makes me warm to the character, as it seems is extra responsible for ending the relationship, and all this may be insecurity and bluster from Bruce. So I'm basically saying there that the reader may give him a bit of sympathy, because we know actually, in fact, he was the person who was dumped in the relationship, and maybe all this stuff is a load of nonsense just because trying to cover the fact he was dumped. I think he is arrogant when he looked at himself in the full-length favourite mirror and smiled. So I could probably go into detail a little bit more there about the fact that the mirror was full-length and it's his favourite mirror, which maybe suggests that he's probably got 7 or 8 mirrors because he's got a favourite one. So I'll read that again. I think he is arrogant when he looked at himself in the full-length favourite mirror and smiled, while he comes across as hugely vain when he unbuttons his rugby shirt and state aloud he looks terrific even though he is on his own. So I guess it is vain, isn't it? Because he was looking at himself in the mirror, but that wasn't enough for him. He wanted to unbutton his shirt so he could really have a good look at himself. And then I then talked about maybe the fact I talked about in a minute ago, where he's a regular gym goer, he's looking at himself in the mirror. That's a fairly natural thing. So maybe I'm going to talk about that. That's a little bit unfair by the writer. However, I think this is a little bit unfair, as looking at yourself in the mirror is a fairly natural thing, and I feel the writer deliberately makes, so again I'm talking about the writer making choices here, the writer deliberately makes Pat seem narcissistic, so someone who loves himself, and a figure of fun. So we've talked about all the things in that extract, or why we don't like him, but how am I going to get top marks? So I would say in the final part of your answer, after all the things you've talked about, why you don't like him, Maybe comment on how the character has changed during the whole extract. Remember our question said talk about the extract, the 20 odd lines, but it also said talk about the whole extract. So you need to go look at the whole extract and see how he's portrayed in the whole extract and comment on how the character has changed during the whole extract. So remember, we are not just one-dimensional people. There are lots of sides to us. There's loads of different dimensions to us. We all have different sides of our personality. So you really need to make sure that you comment on that in the answer. So remember, extract as a whole, so I won't make you read through it, but I've just picked out a few quotes from the extract as a whole. So one quote was when we meet Bruce, and it says, "A tall young man, probably 3 or 4 years older than herself and wearing a rugby jersey. 'I'm Bruce,' he said, 'and I take it you're Pat.' He smiled at her and gestured at her to come into the flat. That was encouraging." So when actually we first meet him, we actually see a bit of a positive side at the beginning of extract. She's relatively charming, he's being polite. So that's at the start, so I'm going to comment on that. But as we go through, halfway through the extract, we see this quote when he's talking about his ex-flatmate. "We were all pleased when she moved to Glasgow. I encouraged her. I said the job she had been offered sounded just fine, a real opportunity." "And was it?" Pat asked. Bruce shrugged. "She fancied herself getting into television journalism. She had been offered a job making tea for some producer. Great job, great tea possibilities." So then we see the unlikable side starting. So the fact he encourages this girl to go for a job, and he sort of makes out that he cares about how the job is, when in fact he's lying just to get out of the flat, paints him as a liar. Bruce shrugged. So if you're shrugging, it suggests you don't care. So it just shows you that he doesn't really care about people, maybe doesn't really care about other people apart from himself. And at the end we see a bit of an unappealing side, being sarcastic when he says great tea possibilities, where it's not a good job, he just thinks she's going to be making tea and wasting her life. So again, so just in that little quote there we see a bit of a lying side, a bit of an uncaring side, and definitely a bit of a sarcastic side. Okay, so now we're going to bring that into our final part of our answer. "When we first meet, I thought he was polite and welcoming. He smiled at her. And then, however, as it gets more negative as the extract develops, halfway through I think he's manipulative by persuading Anna to move out, a real opportunity, and cruel when he's revealed he had no knowledge of the job and just wanted her to go." Bruce shrugged. So all I've done is done the same as I've done before by saying why I dislike him, but I've just mentioned a few other things in the whole of the extract, just 2 or 3 quotes that really have stood out to me. Okay, so remember, shrug is like someone who doesn't really care. So in the final part of your answer, like I said earlier on, comment on how the character has changed during the whole extract. So, by the end of the whole extract, Bruce is a very different person in my eyes. He evolves from pleasant and charming to arrogant, selfish and totally unlikable. So, the pleasant is the first extract that I just mentioned a minute ago, but then I say his journey, so his journey in how I dislike him has gone from someone I like to someone I don't like. So if you comment on the journey, how the character's evolved through the whole extract, you're really going to get top grades on this answer. So there it is as a whole answer. If you want to download it, it's on bpcenglish.wordpress.com. Okay, so remember this would be a grade 9 answer. So in the red here on the left are my quotes, but like I say, you could pause the video, but if you want to download it, it's on bpcenglish.wordpress.com. Any questions, leave me a comment section in the comment box, but hopefully that's given you a bit of a clue on how to answer the evaluation question. So quickly, last few tips then for this question. Rephrase the question. So for example, if it says to what extent do you dislike Bruce, change it to why do I dislike Bruce. Cover the whole text, 7 to 10 quotes. In that 20-line extract, try to go start, middle, bottom, cover all the way through the text. Start a sentence with I think, I feel. Agree with the question. Say what and why words and phrases make you feel that way. So why you dislike Bruce. And lastly, comment on how the character changes through the extract, and that's guaranteed to give you a fantastic answer.